travel can come in so many different forms. Because I think you could still have a multicultural mindset being in one city, for a very long time. I still think that's very possible, especially in America.
Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Dr. Shafer of Talks with Dr. Shafer. I'm a physician, mom, life coach, musician, author, publisher, and I'm passionate about helping you reclaim your story so that you can build your most beautiful future. Today, I have such an inspiring guest on the show. I am so excited to welcome Kristen Kim. Kristen is the producer and creator of Culture Kids Productions. Culture Kids is an award-winning nonprofit and family show with the mission of promoting a multicultural mindset in children. Kristen is a Korean American mother of two who has a background in television production, having worked at major networks including CBS Sports, NBC Sports, Discovery Networks, and Eurosport. Her co-host is her son, who was 5 years old when they started filming the show together. Kim, I absolutely love your mission, the Culture Kids podcast, which as soon as the show's over, please go add it to your list, subscribe, and listen because it's so amazing. And the impact you are making. Starting off, could you tell our audience what it means to foster multiculturalism?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, thank you so much for the incredible intro and just making time for us. So yeah, multicultural mindset. I think it's really simple. It's just being open to learning about all the different ways people around the world live, right? One of the things that I experienced kind of growing up here, also but growing up in Korea as well. I was born and raised there, but immigrated here was at the end of about second grade. And one of the things that I've noticed now looking back is that so many of us, right? And it doesn't just pertain to culture, just for everything, like whether it's, just lifestyle, religion, things and that happening at home, like a lot of us feel like we're living almost like a double life, right? Like the life that we present, the person we present in the classrooms or for adults, like professionally in the workplace. And then there's a life that we have at home. And of course, to a certain level that makes sense. But, especially for, just going to speak from, like an immigrant's perspective, like in the classroom, there was always the sense of shame growing up, I guess, like in the 90s, right? Like if I brought anything about my Korean culture, there was this sense of shame almost, right? Because a lot of times back then, there was a lot of bullying and teasing surrounding that. And I'll just give one, short example is my name, my legal name, for example, that I was born with in Korea, it's Songwon, right? And I just remember like at the beginning of the school year, when the teacher would try to pronounce it, like there would be giggling across the room. And, my nickname ended up being like Songwon Chingchong, like in the playground. And so I changed my name casually to Sun, right? And then when that still caused a lot of teasing, I just eventually legally changed it to Kristen. And so that's just one small example. And I think tons of people can relate, and there's much worse examples, unfortunately, as well. But it's just this idea that we can provide safe spaces in classrooms and in the workplace as well for adults, where we are able to be who we are at home in terms of culture, the food that we eat, the things that we practice at home openly, right? And it's kind of teaching children to have that open mindset, to be curious about how their friends practice their faith at home or how they eat their foods. What utensils do you use? And have that be this enriching, amazing learning experience, one that helps children just expand their horizons, right? So yeah, that's kind of what I guess I think about when I think about the word multiculturalism.
I really appreciate you sharing that history. Can you tell me what is the definition or the meaning behind your birth name?
Oh yeah, yeah. So all Korean names, they have a last name which is one syllable, and usually two syllable names, right? So like my sister's is Haewon, And, my husband, he was born here, but he has a Korean name. It's like Dongkwon, right? And mine was Hongwon. And then each character represents a meaning usually. So Songwon, most of it stands for like grace and wisdom, and those were the characters that my parents put together to create a full name. So yeah, that's usually how Korean names work.
Yeah, I think it's important because, I had understood that my daughter is very interested in Korean culture. She's watched a lot of shows, and her best buddy at school, he is really into K-pop.
Cool,
So
yeah.
she hasn't gotten into that, but she's really into the visual media. And so between the two of
Yeah.
them, they just have learned so much. And I think it's interesting when you reflect on your experience, and really heart-wrenching, heartbreaking, when you think about a name that has such beautiful meaning and was picked with so much intention by your parents to be Grace, and to be such a beautiful, and saying, I'm imparting this wisdom on you. I have this hope for you as you grow up. I think that's a lot of times what our parents are doing when they gift us our names. And then to have that experience in school, it's really heartbreaking to think that then that shame set in. And I think especially when we're young, that shame can have really deleterious impact on us as we grow up and as we learn how to interrelate with others.
Yeah, I think it's also very different per culture as well, right? But in I never like to say like this is the case for all Korean American immigrants, right? But a lot of it is for a lot of Korean immigrants, like when they come here, like one of the things my parents always said is like, don't ruffle any feathers, just study really hard, excel at everything, and that's how you can be treated as an equal here, right? And looking back, I can completely understand why they were saying that, right? But that's kind of where that like sense of shame comes in. And I think in the modern culture, like, amongst friends, like we call that quote unquote like Asian shame, right? Because so many of us have experienced that feeling of like being the outsider, or, in some cases, like being bullied or teased or mocked for bringing who we are. Like, it's not even just like bringing a part of our culture, it's like who we are at home, into the classrooms or extracurricular activities. So there was always that sense of shame. And I think it still lives on in many of us, right? Like, even for me, whose life work is about this, I find myself kind of trying to hide those things. Like, if I'm interacting with like my kids' friends' parents at schools, right?
Mm,
If I find myself in that situation, I do kind of feel that shift, right, in identity a little bit.
yeah.
Something I'm sure many people can relate with. So yeah, it's always constant work in progress.
Yes, it is. It is this disentanglement of us from this childhood shame. And then also the armor that we developed for ourselves to get through that and to survive it. And then I think a big part of, for me as a neurologist with a degree in psychology that does the work I do with people, is the acknowledgement of, yes, you develop these life skills as a young person to survive and get through and even potentially thrive, right, in that environment. Maybe you were a straight A student and you got into the best schools because you did what your parents said, and you created that space for yourself to be an academic all-star because that was what success could look like for you. But what if that's not the life that you wanted? And you may find 10, 20, 30 years down the line that you actually have to start really taking the time to decide whether or not those coping skills that you developed as a kid are still serving you. Is just completely burying yourself in work actually getting you the life you want, right? Because that's what was success for your family. Or would it actually look like a more successful, happy life for you if you actually looked at curriculars and weren't thinking about goals from that perspective, and maybe had a more creative life, which you have certainly created for yourself and involved your son in? Was there a time for you personally, professionally, or a mix of the two where you realized that you needed to do some disentangling of some of those coping skills and those ways of life that you had taken on to make everybody else happy, and realized, no, I'm going to set out on my own path?
Yeah, I think, sorry if this is a predictable answer, but right, like when you become a mother, right?
Mm.
And I became a mother at two interesting points in our country's history. But my daughter was born year 2020, and then my son was about 2.5, right, when she was born. And so I think, you're in survival mode, right? When you have two very little children in that like infant stage, right? So I was, after extreme survival, time has passed. And I forgot to mention my husband's in healthcare. He was a ER physician, and it was a very tough, overwhelming time. We were in New York City in the financial district, and there was a lot going on, right? So having no help and just kind of being, I think, overwhelmed with all of the things that are happening around the world. And I'm a deep empath, right? So just seeing all of that and feeling like I can't do anything, being home with these two very young children. And, obviously, like I didn't have, my parents weren't able to be there to help. They had to fly back to Korea. And, I didn't have like a sitter or nanny at the time because, yeah, we weren't allowed to have anybody outside of our immediate family members in our apartment. So, it was like I wanted to do more. I wanted to do something. And it was just realizing with all the rise of like Asian hate and just so much going on in our city, it brought me back a lot of memories, right? And I was able to squeeze in some therapy sessions in between like the kids' naps. And through those sessions, it made me realize that I never fully had closure or understood or processed some of the things that I had experienced. And obviously, people have experienced much worse than what I have, right? But it just all came back in like 10, 100 times fold when I was reading all those stories about things happening in just a few blocks away in Chinatown, where I was living. And just having that anxiety of my, husband seeing COVID patients, and then like he would walk home really late at night, and that anxiety that someone's going to attack him because he's an Asian male. And so, I would have him like wear like a hoodie and a hat just to like cover his identity, and just all of those things, I think, just brought back a lot of these things. And I realized I want to do more. I want to be able to help not just my children, but every child like experience different reality growing up. And, not just for kids that are experiencing that have, specific religion or culture that they practice at home, but for every child, right? Because I think we have to, I'm a big believer that we have to think about children like extensions of our own, right? So that love, I think, was just like times 100, right? After becoming a mother and experiencing it firsthand. And at the same time, my son, to keep him occupied while I'm, taking care of my newborn, I would play podcasts for him because he just loved podcasts. And so at that time, he started expressing interest in having his own podcast. And I think at that age, he just wanted to talk on a microphone. And so it all kind of came together. I mean, and it took a few years, right? Because we moved out here and like understanding, the setup, and it took a long time. So we didn't launch until 2022, end of 2022. So
It breaks my heart to hear the experience that you had, and that hatred. I can't fathom that. And I think it is such a testament to you and your mindset that you took that seed that could have blossomed into anger and hatred and wanting to isolate yourself from others and other cultures that were not necessarily accepting you, but instead you said, I want to make this better, and I want to focus on teaching, really starting at the heart of the matter, which is teaching children not just tolerance, but a celebration of other cultures and other people and places.
Well, I guess I will say I struggle a lot. I do think that when I listen back on my episodes, because if you listen to our show, it's very heartfelt, right? Like,
Yeah.
because I really want to channel, that love that we have for like our own children to really, I said before, like every child in the world. And as I'm scripting, putting it together, that love deep down is there. Like I really love every child, but I do have to say that I struggle a lot with what you said about that anger we feel, the isolation. It comes and goes, but I think this is the same for a lot of people. It's surface level, right? Like that anger and the bitterness and the wanting to like, just say nasty things and then go in the extreme opposite and just like be like, I screw this, right? And those feelings are there all the time for me, to be honest. But when I acknowledge that and do the work, so hard sometimes, right? Because it's much easier than to be like, I hate these people and whatever, right? It's so, but when you take the pause and you do the work, right? And this is why I think self-growth and entrepreneurship, it just goes hand in hand. That what's deep inside and deep down, and I think this is for everybody, right? And as cheesy as it sounds, but it's what remains is love and that desire for connection. And I made a reel about this, like a social media reel about this, but after speaking with so many different people around the world and collaborating with so many different culture organizations, like one underlying fact, no matter how different we are, what we believe in, is that we just all want to be seen and appreciated, right, and included for who we are, right, and for what our children are. And that's really the future we all want for our children, deep down inside, deep down, past all the anger and whatever, all of the things that's happening, right, in our state of mind. So yeah, I think it's always a struggle. And my close friends, my husband, like once in a while they'll hear me like rant if I see something that's very triggering on the news, right? They'll hear me rant in the external, but I know my friends know that that's not who I truly am on that deeper level. And yeah, and I think that's something that we should remember for everybody, because I don't think this is just me. I think this is, I'm sure you can, as a as a physician doing the work that you do, right? Like who we are, who we truly are on the essence is not those angry words or
No.
cynicism.
I literally I published a book this spring. It's called The Boy and His Brightly Colored Blocks, and it is about a little boy who has kind of a heightened experience with his emotion and with the demands that the world puts on him, right? So if the world told him he was something, he's going to go in the exact opposite direction because he has PDA, or pathological demand avoidance. And so that can be avoidance of who someone says he's supposed to be, or literally avoidance of someone telling him to do something. And the book really seeks to help, one, demonstrate what that experience is like for the person who's going through it, how everything just feels like a challenge and can be very triggering. But two, how can we show up to connect with people rather than correct them when they're feeling triggered? Because it does no good if you're feeling genuinely triggered by something that happened in your history and something in this moment is bringing up something that's buried in the past, telling you that you're being, you're overreacting. That's not going to do any good in that moment. And that's where the emotional intelligence and actually getting curious rather than furious and saying, wow, this is really frustrating or upsetting for you. Do you want to talk about it? And just open that space, give you the opportunity to discuss it. Because I think when we hold that in and then we heap on, just like we were talking at the beginning of the show, heap on that shame, shame for maybe something in our culture that's been brought up and has been framed as negative, shame for our reaction, and shame for when we mask and we say, oh, why did I mask? The amount of times as someone who has, a part of our family history was being Roma, and, growing up, hearing one member of the family yell at another family member that they were a gypsy in a negative way, not in a positive way. And then just being in a casual conversation with friends, with nice people, and having them say, I got blanked. I don't like to say the word, but it starts with a GYPED. And people just say that very flippantly, and it's a part of the kind of nomenclature, just a slang word we use. But the issue with a lot of those words is a lot of them are very ethnically or culturally charged slurs that we don't necessarily in modern times even register the history behind those statements, and we pick them up from family. Maybe we grew up in a city that did have those ethnic groups, so we pick up these words and then we move to wherever and we're using these words not really understanding what we're even saying. And so even myself, as a member of society, although I'm a woman, which has its own challenges, as we as women know. um, I have generally been in a very privileged group. When they do those, I think they're really great exercises for kids and young adults where they show those exercises, they ask people questions and they say, okay, take one step forward if you have this, take one step forward if you have this. And it demonstrates for people we're not starting off at the same place. So we need to have empathy and understanding for one another, and we need to help elevate and pull with us the members of our work group, of our school, of our classmates, so that we are trying to just, instead of widening that gap, as sometimes it feels like in 2025 we see that happening, sometimes it feels the gap is widening, narrow that gap and help elevate everyone, because we will be so much more successful as a collective if we truly focus on doing that. And that's something that when I listen to your show, and again, everyone go listen to a few episodes, even if you don't have kids, listen to a few episodes, maybe pick episodes about cities or countries that you've always dreamt of going to, and listen. And there's so much beautiful imagery. I mean, you're talking about the colors of the buildings and, oh, be careful, these are rocky steps. You're really bringing people into the culture, and you're talking about, okay, well, and this is the music we like and the food we like, and these are some of things that our family does, but by the way, our family does something different than our neighbor's family does, because there's culture of a group and then there's the microculture of your family. So it's so beautifully done, and I think that is such an important gift that you do with, again, as we said before, this not-for-profit effort that you and your son are co-hosting and creating, producing, putting out into the world, to try to help create a world where we really see, as you said earlier, we see each other for who we are. We don't say, oh, you're from this place, that's who you are. We say, this informs me about your life experiences, and maybe I can see you more fully, because I'm not just seeing you from the perspective of, like, for me, a girl who grew up in the middle of the United States, with my bohemian German family, but see this amazing past that you have as a family from Korea, who then immigrated and faced all sorts of challenges as you were already just second grade, and then middle school and high school. That's a challenging time without dealing with new culture, new language. And so I think it's such a gift what you're doing to try to inform and really make it so tactile and so visual and such a connecting experience with the show.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, it's really, we're the hosts. Esther and I are the hosts. And, I mentioned to you before recording that I wanted to bring like other kids' voices and backgrounds into the show as well. But it's really a platform for the community. When we bring the guests in, our podcast is very different in that our guests are involved from the beginning, right? Like we'll ask like, what is there anything that you want to focus on? Questions. A lot of times they're like, oh, I have no idea. It's a little overwhelming. Can you like decide one or two and maybe I'll pick one, right? But some guests want to read the script before we record. And what I do make sure, like 99% of the time, is that they listen back on the episode. Kind of funny. Some guests are like, I know your show. I trust you. You don't need to send it to me because I'm going to be really busy. So just air it. We've had a few instances of those, but I ask them for feedback, and sometimes like early they'll say, hey, like it's important that you use this wording, right? So it's really a platform for the community. It's not for me to ever talk about someone else's culture, religion, unless it's my own. Like the episodes that we do, just me and Asher, is like if we're learning about like animals, right? Where it's a little bit more factual and right, like a specific landmark where there's really not much like culture, like interpretation that can be around it. But those, or if it's about Korean culture, right? Like that. Like we did an episode where we pretended like we went to like a Korean restaurant to try like rice cakes, right, for Lunar New Year. So that was super fun. But yeah, it's really a platform for the community. That's the way I see it. And I always ask like at the end of the episode, like, is there anything that you can say, like if a child from your town or city can listen to it and feel excited about, right, like they feel a little bit more represented, like what would you say, right? And that's kind of where those heartfelt moments at the end of our episode kind of come together. So it's so much fun. Like I love what I do so much. Like if I had a whole day to myself once, and I was like, I just want to work on Culture Kids for 8 hours uninterrupted and I'll be happy. So, yeah, I'm just so grateful.
I love that. I so appreciate you sharing that, because that's honestly how we feel when we dive into our creative projects. And I think that's the beauty of when you are truly living the life that's in alignment with your strengths and your goals, and you're on that path. Because work, I know there's this old saying, if I've never worked a day in my life, and people would say that, and maybe you'd roll your eyes like, well, of course you work. But growing up, actually, my mother is an oral pathologist, and she loved what she did, which, when you take a step back from it, wait, you love oral pathology? You love that? Like, that's the best thing. But genuinely, she loves it. She tried to retire. She actually even left the state when she retired. Okay, I'm done. Wash my hands of this. I'm leaving the state. I think she had a return flight in 3 weeks. I think she came back less than a week later and reinstated herself part-time, because she couldn't, because she really truly did work that was meaningful for her and that was in alignment with her, very scientific mind, very service-oriented person. And so I think, it's really beautiful when you do work that gives you that feeling of satisfaction, and that it doesn't feel like work. It just feels, I'm just living my purpose. It's another day, a blessed day on this earth, living my purpose. What are the things? So when you travel, now that you and Asher have this experience together, and I'm sure, your husband listens to episodes, and so it's a family affair. When you travel, is it different now that you have this process? Are you scouting out places? Are you planning episodes and getting inspired? What does that look like for you as a family?
Yeah, I think travel can come in so many different forms, right? Like I remember when my kids, were very little, like to me travel was just like, I just need like change of scenery, and it was again like survival mode, anything to make things easier, right? But I think my curiosity for exploring the world and learning about the world cultures comes from when I was in do you know the program ESL, English is a second language? So I was in
Yeah.
ESL for a few years, once we immigrated, and I'm so lucky that my parents put me in a school that had that program. I went to a public school that had an incredible ESL program. I think about it all the time. And I just remember being so fascinated that everybody I was meeting, and surprisingly, the two classes I was in, like, they didn't have any Korean students, so I was kind of like forced to like sign language and use my facial expressions, right? To communicate, and it was so fascinating. I still remember almost every child that I like played with. Then, just came from different cultures, and we would like just find all sorts of interesting ways to play with each other, right? I played with a child that came from Mexico, from Japan, from so many different parts of Europe, and we would just exchange information. And that memory was just, there were terrifying moments, but it just left a huge mark on me. And we didn't travel growing up at all. I've been to like Japan when I lived in Korea because I have family there, but in the States, like, we didn't really get an opportunity to travel much, but I knew that was going to be a big priority of mine. And my husband, he's not, he works, he used to do like travel medicine as well. So just when our energy came together, we realized as a couple and as a family that we wanted to prioritize seeing the world. And I had this incredible opportunity to work overseas, like in Fiji, for a few months to kind of help some friends out that ran like a resort there. And just meeting so many different people from that part of the world, they were coming from New Zealand, Australia, and like some parts of Asia. It made me realize that when we're talking about like joy or culture, right? That I think oftentimes we think that when our children are presented with opportunities like best school or, like best whatever, everything, give them, buy them like everything that they need, put them in the best summer programs and camps. Like, I think a lot of times we equate that to maybe like success or happiness, right? I hung out a lot at the village that nearby where I was staying, and something clicked when, families would come and they would show their kids like how, they lived in the village. Like, they'd be like, "Oh, don't you feel so lucky? Because back at home, you have, you go to a school with tables and chairs and couches, right?" But I couldn't disagree. Like, I disagreed with them so much internally on that, because spending time with the people there in the community there, like the joy that the children and the families had and the way they loved and looked out for each other, it's something that we all crave for, right? In first world countries and, in the Western culture, like, if someone's sick, it's like all hands on deck. You have a baby, like, you can go and take a nap, and the women there, they're just so nurturing. And the children are just the laughter that I heard every day from the kids, the teenagers, right? And I was talking to one of the men there, and he got an offer to work out in California. He's like, "Why would I leave this?" He's like, "Why would I leave my whole community for money?" Right? He's like, I don't have this. Like, these are my people. This is my joy. Like, I just remember thinking, like, happiness and joy, right? And there's so much like we can learn from each other. And I learned so much about life, appreciation, joy, and they just know so much about how to, like, take care of themselves with, certain like natural elements. And it's changed my perspective greatly, I think. And that's one of the things that I wanted to share with the children as well, that there's so many different ways to build homes that we live, but there's so much we can learn from each other. There's no such thing as like superiority or what's right or what's wrong. It's about everybody has something amazing, wonderful to share. And let's exchange those ideas and honor them, right? And find
Yeah.
similar things that we can all find common ground in, which is so many things, right? Majority of the things that we do every day it can be translated across all cultures and religions, and that's how we form the friendships and the connections. And it's like if every child can understand this at an early age, as early as like 3, 4, and 5, and maintain that, right, level of understanding, like what will the world look like in 10, 20 years?
I mean, it's so inspiring, and it's the reason why we all have to support the important work that you're doing and the stories that you're telling and the opportunity that you're giving for children to have this experience. And like I said, just listen to a few episodes because it's so expertly done to really get you engaged and to feel like you're there with you and your son Asher, and that you're walking down those streets and you're smelling whatever, delicious food that you're discussing, and you're hearing someone standing next to you, and it's almost like you can picture the colors of what they're wearing. I mean, it's very, very beautifully textured, and it's easy to visualize. And I think that is such an important piece of connecting us with one another's experiences. And that is why travel is so important. And, after COVID, one of the first things that people did when the restrictions were lifted was travel. I so appreciate the work that you're doing and how you are sharing these stories in such a vibrant way. You have won several prestigious awards for the podcast, including a coveted Webby. And there are so many amazing podcasts out there with the amazing work that you do and this really long running show at this point that has had such wonderful critical acclaim, so many 5-star reviews. Do you have any recommendations for people who are out there inspired to start a podcast as to how to go about creating a meaningful and impactful show?
I think there's many ways that I can provide advice and feedback on this, because there's like the production elements and then there's like the mission driven type of work, but I'm going to choose the mission driven type of work feedback. And this is actually, I think, a lot harder than people realize. The advice is really speak from the heart. I know it sounds so cliche, but along the way, whenever you start any project, right, people are going to give feedback and advice, which is, important to always have an open mind. But especially in the world of podcasting, really rely on what's in your heart, because people have to connect. There's so much noise out there, right? In all media platforms, there's so much noise. But when you're speaking from the heart and, that level of authenticity and that level of connection that you're providing, the right people will tune in. And I think, that kind of ties into what I was talking about before about self-growth and, and entrepreneurship should go hand in hand. Just really focus on self-growth, because any project, company, right? Like, there's a statistic, I think it was like 98 point something of, startups fail within 5 years, right? And it goes for shows and, creative projects as well. And it's because of leadership, because, the people who are leading the organization, they say that you just got to have that one CEO who is completely delusional, who just believes that their work is going to change the world. You need that one person. And that person's going to be you, right? So invest in self-growth, invest in really before your work, because you are going to be the person that's going to carry through when everything falls apart, when you get the angry reviews or whatever, podcasters face, but all sorts of things, the financial challenges, big financial challenges going into podcasting, right? You're going to be the person that's going to carry it through. And if, you don't have your ducks in a row, and if you don't really step up to that challenge and invest in your self-growth, you're not going to have the tools in those moments, right? And so that's my I don't want to say like advice, but that's just like been my experience, and that's what I'm currently working on. And I think that once I've started to do that, my show has grown a lot more. And also we're attracting all these people, because if you hear every single one of my episodes at the beginning, and this is recent, I started to say just really transparently, like, we're a grassroots organization running on volunteers. Like, any help would be appreciated, right? And I've been saying that, and the amount of people that have reached out to be like, hey, I have this in, engineering and social, like, what can I do to help you? Has been massive, to the point where it's like, okay, like now I have to like kind of, pick and choose. And so it's been really eye-opening to see the magic that happens when you pour your true heart and soul, like who you are, right? As Kristen, or, Miss, like who you are, like just share that, and the right people can't stay away. They're, people what resonates with you, we want to be closer to, and we want to be a part of it. And so, yeah, I think that's my that's really like a life advice, right? I feel like, but
Yeah, absolutely. When you lean into yourself, you find the people that are meant to walk beside you. When you're reaching outside of yourself to try to fit into these molds that were never cast for you, that's when you kind of lose yourself and you're just simply playing that role. And it's not authentic, and it doesn't lead to happiness. Now, hearing your answer made me think of another question I had for you based on the podcasting. What does success for your podcast look like or feel like for you?
that's a great question. My hope really is that this mindset, not just multiculturalism, but that we wouldn't just be pegged under diversity or shows with like diverse representation, that we would just be just another kids show that everybody can enjoy, that it's not for when we're talking about diversity or inclusion, right? That this is our world, this is the reality, this is not just a certain section of when we feel like, oh, all these things are happening in the world, so now we have to focus on diversity. And then, right, when the pendulum, so, to me, success is when it's just another great kids show, and this mindset is something like, well, it should be part of children's learning experience, period. And that's what I'm trying to, when I mentioned before when we spoke privately that my dream is to bring in, academic materials and hopefully curriculum someday, is that this will be a natural part. It doesn't have to be culture kids, right? But this idea of introducing children to different cultures and different, ways people live is a natural part of their early childhood learning experience. Not in high school, not in junior high school, but right, as soon as they're able to talk and learn things in school, that it's a natural part. And some schools are doing it already. And unfortunately, like independent schools, right? But like it should be available to all children, no matter where they live. That to me would be success. Am I gonna see it in my lifetime? I'm gonna be that Delulu CEO that I mentioned before. Yes, it's going to happen, right? So I'm not gonna stop. I'm never going to retire until I see it.
I love it. And I think creatives and people with the energy you have and the passion you have, they don't retire. They may stop or slow down on doing one thing, but then you just channel that energy into something else. You can't ever really stop. This train isn't going to stop, and I love it. I'm on board, and I want to see where it's going. I'm so excited and so grateful to share it with our listeners today. One thing that when I was listening to the podcast, a visualization I had was, I don't know, do you remember Samantha Brown, the travel expert? who had her show. I'm trying to remember if it was on PBS, Rick Steves, Samantha Brown, travel the world, and not just show you a city and show you all the places that you can find in a tour guide, but actually really show you music, culture, meet people from the area. And it was really impactful, and it helped you if you were a kid who couldn't necessarily travel a bunch. You could learn about other people, other languages, other cultures, other foods, and really get these dreams in your head about what you wanted to do once you had the opportunity to travel. And so for me, listening to your show really evoked that feeling. I came to the show because of the multiculturalism, and you and I connected on LinkedIn actually because of your passion for promoting multiculturalism. That being said, when I experienced your show, I was like, this is a travel show. This is like a really cool kids travel show. So I think it's fun because it is about culture, but different listeners are going to take different things from it. And when I listened to it, I was thinking, oh, like every family before they go to this place, that place, etc., they should listen to this because it's going to open their children's and their own minds as adults to experiencing that place in a different, more open, more present way to what's really going on around them. So I think there are so many different ways you can enjoy the show and so many different ways you can use it to teach kids and inform kids. Like, it's about culture, it's about traveling and those times where you can't travel, right? During COVID, or just because you've got 2 little kids at home and there's no way we're going to get everybody on an airplane. We have 4. And when you travel with 1 adult, it's so different than when you travel with 4 kids and 2 adults, right? It's a different game. Air travel becomes much more of a coordination issue than it's like a sport in of itself. So sometimes the best way to travel is through an amazing, well done podcast, just like Culture Kids. So thank you so much for the work you're doing, not only to really highlight diversity and highlight the importance of multiculturalism, but just bring these vibrant images into our homes through the power of audio.
Thank you. Yeah, if I don't know if it's kind of like rewinding back to what we were talking about before, but I think if you listen to our episodes about a year ago, sometimes it's a little tough to listen to because like our equipment has changed significantly, so the quality of audio is very different. But it is different in that the reason why we started incorporating these like more like, oh, magical train and we're actually going to transport ourselves to the location is because I think that's what kind of like attracts, like that's kind of like the exciting part, right? Like adding these like different senses. But I think one thing that I want to always keep in mind was because I think this is majority of people around the world, right? That they are not able to travel, right? And what I hope is that, because I think you can still have a multicultural mindset being in one city, for a very long time. I still think that's very possible, especially in America, right? Like, whether it's like through food or other ways, but it's just, I try to keep in mind that, our mission isn't necessarily so that, families will want to travel all over the world. It's more so that, 2 things, I guess, for children to prioritize, as they're growing up, kind of like what I did, that I want to be able to meet different people, kind of like the experience I had in ESL, and to be in a place where I can, make friends of people of all cultures, and if possible, to travel one day, right? So I think that's something, because, I hear from so many of our listeners, and majority are people who, families are like, we're not able to travel ever. But my child is now dreaming of it when they grow up, right? And I know exactly how that feels like. And I think that's an important part of like what we do, and which is why we started incorporating this like real life element of like, being in that place in, Cinque Terre, or we're going to Nigeria next week, right, in Lagos. And so I think yeah, because what I didn't want it to be this show where children might feel like well, that will never be possible, or families feel like this will never be possible for me in my current life, so I can't learn about it. So that's a big focus of my creative process, just keeping that as a center point of our mission. So
Yeah, well, I can tell you as an adult listener, because I do think, yeah, you can definitely trigger people's FOMO, their fear of missing out, if you advertise or market something in a certain way. But
right.
I just felt very included, and it felt very experiential. It did not feel like, oh, I'm excluded from this thing that I can't, because
Mhm.
again, with small children and our work schedule, I'm probably not going to get to these places
Right.
anytime soon, right? But it didn't trigger that FOMO in me. It actually just triggered this just feeling of warmth and of a shared experience. I think that's the beauty. So for this listener, you were definitely hitting all those marks of things that you were wanting to hit. That was definitely an experience our family had. So I really appreciate being able to experience your show. And I appreciate you coming on today and sharing your personal story, talking about your podcast. What is coming up that listeners should be looking out for, and how can they connect with you, listen to the podcast, and just keep abreast of everything you have going on?
Yeah, we are officially, we applied to be a nonprofit last year and it took a whole year and more. So we started our fundraising with, a consultant who's also volunteering her time, just amazing, amazing people involved. And yeah, if, putting it open out there, if anyone has any information about foundations that would want to fund our project and our nonprofit, we are here. So I'm actually really, really excited because it gives us opportunities for expansion, to, start working on academic materials and obviously growth. All of our growth has been, organic, meaning like we don't have like a marketing person or social media person, but it would be great to kind of have those resources, through our fundraising, and just a lot of great episodes coming up. Next week, we're going to Lagos, Nigeria. When I mean we're going, I'm not physically going, but all of you guys listening will be going to Lagos, Nigeria. We're going to Japan to learn about soy sauce. We're going to go to Switzerland to learn about Swiss chocolate with Lindt. So many episodes. Oh, going back to Italy to learn about Ligurian pesto. Our production calendar is full until the fall, and more. So yeah, very excited. I hope you guys will join us and make a reservation on the culture train, on our magical culture train.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much again for being on the show. It's been such an honor to have you here. Is there a website you'd like to direct anyone to, or social media, so that they can connect with you and follow along?
Yeah, it's at Culture Kids Productions for Instagram, and our website is culturekidsproductions.org.
Awesome. And on LinkedIn, a great way to follow along with the work you're doing, not just with the podcast, but I think also, social work and working on the fundraising, the networking. It's such a great kids podcast is the coolest community on the planet. Like when you go to Podcast Movement, which is a big podcast convention, I wasn't able to go this year. But when you go to Podcast Movement and you meet everybody, I mean, everyone's cool, everyone's great, but the coolest, most fun people are the people who do kids podcasts, for sure, I have to say. Well, awesome. Everybody follow along on Instagram and check out the website, and make sure to subscribe to Culture Kids. It's an amazing show, and you'll be joining us and our family as we listen along. Thank you so much, Kristen, for being here. And thank you to our storytellers for being here as well. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the show and let us know if you have any questions, or if you have topics or guests that you want us to have on the show. We are so excited that you're here. And as always, stay safe and take care. I'll talk to you soon.
Everybody's lonely, but you can hold on to